Today I am going to be exposing my bad sewing habits. We're gonna do a few sewing projects today. We've got no patterns, we've got no pins, we've got no plan. It's just vibes, okay? This is not gonna be a tutorial, but I wanted to take you along with me with a few sewing projects that I have this week, just for fun. I've been sewing for over 10 years now, and I've found that some things in my creative process have stayed the same, and a lot of things have really changed. I think it's really normal for creativity to fluctuate over the years, and I am coming out of a time of just feeling really unenthusiastic about sewing. And so these are very relaxed, no pressure sort of projects, just for fun. I thrifted some fabric a few days ago and paid a grand total of $8 for two pretty good size pieces of fabric. And I'm gonna take you along like my thought process throughout a sewing project before, during, and after, where I'm gonna style the pieces that I made. This is kind of a video about everything related to sewing except the actual sewing. So let's jump back a few days and I'll show you the fabric I got. We are starting off this sewing journey in my closet, in front of all of the clothes that I already own. One of the first things that I like to do in a sewing project is take a look at my fabric, observe what kind of characteristics it has, and then I might pull some pieces from my closet that are kind of comparable in feeling of the material and then also what I'm imagining I could create with them. So for example, both of these fabrics that I bought today, this one is kind of behaving like halfway between a chiffon and a crepe. And the reason that I really loved this fabric was A, it's a color that I don't necessarily go for that often, but I feel like still suits my coloring. But most importantly, what I really like about this fabric is it has a really nice drape on the bias. So when you turn the fabric diagonally like this, it has a nice amount of like give in the weave. As soon as I saw that, I was able to start thinking of the sort of shapes that would be most flattering with that cut. And then similarly with this really nice, I think it might be cotton, I'm fingers crossed it is cotton, but I will never know. But this is a really fun like grid mesh. You can see the pattern better there. This does have a little bit of one-way stretch, but it also has a nice amount of stretch when you put it on the bias like this. And if you don't know, putting something on the bias just means turning the fabric on a 45-degree angle, and it kind of shifts the way that the weave of the fabric sits, and with a lot of materials it allows for a lot more stretch. This dress that I thrifted recently is cut on the bias. When you have a garment like this and it's laying straight and it looks like it won't fit you, but then when you put it on, it expands and like perfectly contours to your curves, chances are that is cut on the bias. So anyways, I think I'm gonna start with the white fabric. We're gonna see how far we get. We might not even touch the blue fabric today or in this video. We will see. I probably have about 1.5 meters of this, and it is double of this width that you see here. It might be 36. Struggles of a Canadian seamstress. I will constantly be flip-flopping between imperial and metric. You just have to deal with it. So I do have a decent amount of fabric to work with, and I think what I want to start with is a pair of cargo pants. I saw this pair that were crocheted, and I think that contrast between the really like delicate crochet material with the like silhouette of a more utility pant, I think that's really cool. And while this material is not crocheted and it won't like really give the same effect, I think it will still display the weave of this fabric really nicely. So not only just with aesthetics, but when I'm starting a sewing project, I also really want to think about practicality. The nice thing about sewing is that you can make pretty much whatever you want. Like the sky is kind of the limit as opposed to shopping in a store, which is really amazing. You can express your creativity so much with it. But what I've found over the years is that the pieces that I make that are a little bit more out there and things that I really love the look of, for example, like if I was window shopping online or something, things that I would be like, that is so cool. That's so different than anything I've ever seen. Those aren't always necessarily the pieces that I would actually reach for in my wardrobe. So when you actually have the freedom to be able to make pieces that are super unique that people wouldn't come across very often, you have to consider whether or not your wardrobe actually has an application for them, because then I find they just kind of sit in my wardrobe and don't do much. And when I have the perfect occasion to pull them out, yes, it's a really satisfying feeling, but I'm really trying to build up my everyday wardrobe right now, so I'm not gonna do anything too crazy with this. I'm gonna go with the cargo pants because this is see-through. I'll probably be wearing them over like a bathing suit or something like that in the summer, but I can also already think of a lot of other ways to style them aside from just that one purpose. So unless it's for a very special occasion these days, I don't really want to go ahead with a sewing project unless I can already imagine several different scenarios in which I would wear that garment. And so for me, a mesh dress or a long mesh skirt or separate set or something like that were things that I was thinking about for this fabric, but I don't necessarily see myself reaching for those things for that many different occasions, other than like putting on top of a bathing suit when I want to feel really chic, which is not usually the case when I'm wearing a bathing suit anyways. So something more casual fits the bill. You gotta think about these things. So now that we have our concept kind of solidified, we have to think about the pattern. This is when I like to go to my closet. If I can find anything that will be easy to lay flat and cut a pattern from without having to resort to like a traditional pattern, or even worse, like cutting a pattern apart that I've never used before, that takes so long and I'm just not interested. I really like using clothing that already exists, that I already know fits me really nicely, as opposed to a more traditional pattern. Even if I have used it before, I find that I just don't end up ever getting the fit that I want with patterns. The size charts I find are always so out of whack, and so if I know that something already fits me the way that I want the final product to fit me, I'm just gonna use that and not waste my time with having to make a lot of alterations as I go along. So I have the perfect pair of cargo pants right here. These are just a very basic wide leg cotton pants. They have 2 square pockets on the butt, and I think if I fold them and lay them flat, I'll be able to cut a reasonably accurate pattern from them. Something to keep in mind if you're a beginner sewist is that when you are cutting a pattern, it might look a little bit weird to you, but resist the urge to start like trimming the pattern down, because a lot of times your pattern pieces might look like they're going to fit a lot larger than they actually are when they're 2-dimensional and on a piece of paper than how they'll look when you actually sew them together. For example, this curve on the back of my pants looks very, very exaggerated, but if you deconstructed the pair of pants that I cut them from, even though it doesn't look like it has this huge like gapey butt in person, if you took them apart, it would look exactly like this. So even if you think that your pattern piece looks a little bit too big, it's always better to err on the side of larger, because you can always take it in, but it's a lot more difficult to try and work with the project if you cut it in too small. So keep that in mind. Sewing beverage, very, very important. One of the most important things to keep in mind is the right side and wrong side of your fabric. Almost all fabrics, even if they just to the naked eye look like there's no real difference between either side, if you look and feel very closely, there's usually subtle differences. So you want to have both right sides, or like the outside of your fabric, placed together so that when you turn everything inside out, or outside in, I guess, all the seams are on the inside. I'm gonna actually use what was the inside or the wrong side of this fabric as the outside because it's a little bit more textured than the right side was. And I kind of like that texture to look a little bit better because it kind of brings out the knit texture of it a little bit more. Once the fabric is cut and you start either pinning or sewing your garment together is kind of when it starts to be revealed whether or not the concept that you had in your mind is actually going to come to fruition very well or not. And immediately when I cut this fabric out, because it was like woven in a tube, the way that the fabric was constructed, there was no way that I could undo it and see a single layer of it in the store. And so I thought that the stiffness of the fabric would fit the cargo pant sort of look, but upon cutting the pattern and looking at just a single layer, you can see it actually sits very like flowy, and it's a lot more sheer than I thought it was going to be. It just, I think, is going to have a little bit of a different feel than what I originally imagined. So moment of truth, once we get these seams going, whether or not this concept can come together. But that's the great thing about sewing, is that you can just kind of keep changing it as you go along. I don't think this fabric is going to give off that much fiber or like fray a lot. It's already been through the wash once and it looks perfectly fine. So I'm just going to do a straight stitch and then leave about like a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'll go back over that seam allowance and zigzag so that it kind of binds the seam together. Another part of my sewing process is I really love listening to music while I'm sewing. Something that kind of feels like the mood that I'm trying to create with the piece, just to kind of keep my mind inspired. I've reached the part of pant construction where everything could go very wrong. I haven't made pants in a really long time because I've just been doing like a lot of dresses and tops, and so I need to really focus and make sure I don't end up with like, I don't know, like a unit leg or something like that. Curve first, then inseam. Yeah, okay. See, this is why it's good to practice thinking while you're sewing. I was just about to start sewing the next seam together, and then I remembered I wanted to possibly add pockets to maybe the outside of like the outer thigh. I'm just gonna go kind of half try this on in a mirror and see if I like that look, because pockets on the side of your pants are gonna be a lot easier to attach before you actually sew them into like 2 tubes, if that makes sense, while everything can still lie flat. So I need to make that decision. Be right back. It's the next day now. I am so proud of myself because I actually finished a sewing project in 1 day because I just kept it simple. I didn't overcomplicate things, and I just went through with the idea that I had in my mind, and it's done. It's in my closet. We're gonna style it a little bit later, but I want to do one more project just because I'm already on a roll. I was laying out this blue fabric that I bought yesterday, and I think it's just gonna require a little bit more energy and effort than what I'm kind of in the mood for today. So I'm gonna put this aside. What I do have is going to be a project entirely out of scraps, which I love doing. I thrifted this really long tiered cotton gauze black skirt. So a lot of adjectives going on. And for the first like about month or so I owned it. I kept trying to style it with things and it just wasn't right. I had all these ideas for outfits in my mind, and then every time I tried to execute them, I just felt very like Victorian ladylike, which is not at all what I had in mind. Came to the conclusion that the skirt was just a little bit too long. It came basically to my ankles, and I'm 5'9", so that's a long skirt. So I ended up cutting 2 of the tiers off, and so I'm left with this much fabric and it has, you can actually see right through it. It has that really nice ruffle to it. I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, about 4 yards, meters-ish. That's super approximate, obviously, but I have a lot of fabric in a very specific shape to work with, and so I think I want to make some sort of top with this. I love that it already has this ruffle built in, something that I always try to keep in mind, especially when you're doing like reworking projects like this, like a thrift flip, or if you're working with just scraps of another project like this. I always like to see what elements this piece already has that I can keep and kind of build the piece around that. And so for this piece of fabric, I really like that it already has this ruffle and it's already finished on the bottom. So I have a really nice hem, especially if I'm using a lot of fabric. If I want to create more of a ruffle, it's going to take a really long time to hem. So I'm going to try to take advantage of what's already finished on the bottom of this. I'm picturing utilizing this ruffle under the bust, having it be kind of fitted, and then where this ruffle naturally breaks on the fabric, keep that ruffling out. And then I also found, just laying around in my sewing room, this satin bow with a ribbon attached to it. I don't know what this is from, but it's a nice piece of black satin ribbon. So I was thinking of doing some sort of bow detail at the bust, so have it put together, or maybe like tie together at the bust, and then be like open on the bottom. And then chances are I will have more fabric left over, so I could also do like a little detached sleeve or something like that. I don't know, but let's begin. I'm a little more scantily clad now, because another thing that I always like to do is, yes, of course, cozy sweatshirt, but I always wear something very fitted underneath that is as close to my body without wearing any clothes, basically, like measurement wise, just so that I can easily, while I'm sewing, kind of hold things up to my bodice and get a good idea, so I don't have to like keep going to change and adjust the fit and everything. I just had a genius idea. This ruffle, all the fabric that I'm left with after I've cut the bottom piece and then the 2 bust pieces, I have about 1 meter of this ruffle left. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut around the center ruffle and then fold, if this is making any sense, I don't know, fold it over and stitch it down as close as I can without actually sewing the ruffle, so that when I turn it inside out, I'll have pieces for the straps that are pre-ruffled, and they'll just be like as thin as I can possibly get them, but they'll have that nice little ruffle that will echo what I have going on at the top of the bust and then in the ruffle on the bottom. I think this is genius. This is why I really like reworking clothing that already exists, because I feel like you come up with a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily just think of if you were just looking at a piece of fabric. Like, that's what I was feeling about that blue chiffon. I wasn't really getting any ideas that were anything beyond like the most basic piece, which is still fine. Like, it's amazing to make really thought out, well-fitting staples, but it's just not what I'm in the mood for right now. So I'm very happy to be working with this scrap of fabric that I would otherwise have no use for, and filling a gap in my wardrobe. So this is how the wide leg pants turned out. This is a very realistic representation of like my casual style, especially in the summertime. This is like my outfit formula, is like baggy pants, tight tank top, and then some sort of shoe. I put espadrilles on with this outfit, which I feel like is kind of random, but I just reached for them. I want to talk about sheer garments, because this is a problem I had with styling these pants. I mean, I didn't really try that hard. I just reached for the only other white thing that I have, which is this tank top. I did say originally that I would like to use these as like a swim cover up, and I think they would be really cute. I have a red bikini specifically that I think would go really perfectly with this, just with the top, and then you can kind of see the red through the bottoms. But for this, I did put on white underwear, and I'm unsure if I like that you can see the underwear, or if I should go for like a nude. It's such a fine line with see-through garments, whether you want to try really hard to conceal your undergarments, or if you want to go all the way the other way and make it visible and make it a statement. But I feel like anything in between that is a little off-putting. Like, it just makes the outfit look less put together. So I think maybe white I won't go for next time, but I don't think you can really tell from far away. I could be wrong. I could look back at this footage and be like, this is horrible. Anyways, I wanted to show you how I would style these pieces, because I think that really has a lot to do with the design process overall. That might sound really like no-brainer to some people. For me personally, I think I touched on this earlier, but I don't remember because it was like 2 days ago. I oftentimes, like, I have so many ideas for different garments that I want to make, but they just kind of sit there if I don't really like logically think about how I'm gonna style them. Not only that, but like, do I, once the piece is styled, actually have an application to wear that outfit? Designing the piece is one thing, styling the piece is another thing, but then actually having the opportunity to wear what you styled and have it, you know, like kind of fit the vibe of where you are, that can be tricky, especially if you live a pretty regular life like I do. Like, I'm a very low-key, casual kind of person, and sometimes in my brain, I'm not that person, especially when it comes to clothing, and then I have to remind myself, like, you don't have anywhere to wear this. Just like, face it. Maybe in a different life, if you were a different person, you could, but for this current day, it's not happening. And that's not to say that you shouldn't like push the boundaries with your style and everything, but within reason, for me at least. Like, I don't go to like formal events very often, for example. So am I gonna spend like 10 hours making a really elaborate gown? Or could I take that same time and effort to fill in some gaps in my wardrobe with things like these pants that I'm actually going to reach for a lot more often? I want to move on because I am obsessed with the next thing that I made. The black cotton gauze top turned out better than I imagined, and the way that I styled it, I am obsessed with myself in this outfit. So let's cut to that. So this is how I styled the final product of the second top that I made, and I don't think I've ever found an outfit, well, this is probably a gross exaggeration, but currently I feel like I've never found an outfit that suits my style more than this combination of things I have going on. So bear with. Another monochrome outfit. I really like doing that, honestly. I know it's kind of boring, but I have come to realize that like I feel so comfortable in neutral colors, and when my outfit is kind of like all cohesive in tone, like if I have more than 2 tones or colors going on in an outfit, I just feel like not comfortable. So I really love that about this outfit, and black is like my absolute go-to for something like that. So this is checking all boxes. It's so comfortable because I paired it with these really comfy, stretchy flare pants that I thrifted recently, and I've been like living in these. I was excited to share this outfit with you because unlike the white pants, I had a very clear idea while I was making this top and as it was kind of piecing together in my mind on what I wanted to feel like when I was wearing the piece, and so therefore what I would style it with in order to get there. Because I feel like on its own, it's a little bit like kind of boho-ish, you know, like it's cotton gauze, it has a lot of ties and some ruffles. That sort of vibe is not necessarily my go-to. Like, I think this would have a very different vibe if I just paired it by itself with like blue jeans or something and sneakers. Like, that is going in a direction that I don't necessarily love, because that just doesn't feel that genuine to me. All of those pieces individually, sure, but putting something like this that's a little bit more feminine and like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a prairie vibe, if that makes sense. I think that pairing something like that with slightly more like edgy pieces is a really fun juxtaposition. And so it came to me as I was making this top that I wanted to pair it over this sheer semi-fitted like button-down blouse that I have. Originally I had styled it like the way that you actually wear the top, and it just like wasn't sitting right. It didn't like highlight what was going on over it enough, and it also didn't highlight what was going on under it. So then I undid a few buttons and dropped the shoulders down, and immediately I think that like transformed the top half of this outfit. I also paired this with a little heel. This would be like my ideal summer night drinks outfit, maybe for when it's like a little overcast and I'm feeling like having a little all black dark cloud moment, you know? I also wanted to talk about the fact that I didn't really film very much of me making this black top. I barely filmed anything actually. That's because there was a lot of like nuance to this sewing process with this as opposed to the pants that I cut a pattern for and just followed the steps as I know how to take them. With this, I didn't have a pattern. I didn't even use pins until I put the ruffle in on the bottom, and I had to force myself to go and find pins. Because it was such an oddly shaped piece of fabric as opposed to if I had gone and bought it from the store, I really like sewing like that because it kind of challenges your mind to almost think about it like a puzzle. Thinking about like, how can you use the most amount of the weirdly shaped pieces of fabric so that you have the most minimal amount of waste but are left with something like interesting that you're actually gonna wear. Even though the piece of fabric was so long, I actually ended up almost using every little bit of fabric. I only had very, very small scraps left over, and I'll probably use those for something else anyways. Oh, also, all in all, I wanna mention, those pants ended up costing me $4 to make because the piece of fabric that I got was $4, and I'm probably gonna make a little matching top for them anyways. So you can say that that whole outfit cost me $4. And this, in theory, I'm gonna say was free because I already spent the money on buying the skirt and I didn't have plans to make a top out of the skirt. So that's free in my books. So for 2 days and $4 and 2 wardrobe staples, I think that is a massive win. You can kind of get as methodical and meticulous with sewing as you want, and I really mostly prefer projects like these where I just go ahead and sew kind of whatever I want. Especially with something like this top, I enjoyed that process a lot more than the pants because it involved a lot more creativity and like creative solutions to problems that will inevitably come up as you go along if you're not using a pattern. Those are always my favorite pieces that I've made, are things that I never would have come to that conclusion if I hadn't had so many issues throughout the project. So if you're frustrated during a sewing project, I think you should just look at it that way, as like a little puzzle in your mind. Really sit there and stare at the fabric, stare at the steps that you've already taken, and work out multiple different solutions to the next step that you can take to get you out of the problem that you've created with the steps you've already taken, because that's just how sewing works for people who don't use patterns. And if you don't like patterns, I see you, we are the same, you get me, and I'm never gonna stop. So how did we like that sewing journey? I had a lot of fun filming this video because it wasn't a tutorial of me teaching you how to sew. I think even though there are a lot of technicalities when it comes to sewing, there's a lot of things that you can either do right or wrong in theory. There is also so much wiggle room. Everybody does things differently. I think it's something that a lot of people assume they would be bad at or that they don't have the patience for. I hear that from people so often over the years that, oh, I've tried sewing, but I'm just so bad at it, or I want to learn, but I don't have the patience. But trust me, I am a very impatient person. I'm very easily deterred from things if I'm not good at them or if they're not going my way. And somehow I have maintained this hobby, and it was my job for many years, for a long time. And that shouldn't make any sense with my personality type. And I'm gonna be so real, I am not the best seamstress ever, like by any means at all. And I have still been able to make so many things that I love, that I think are unique, and that other people have appreciated. So I wanted to just bring you a little bit more of a relaxed space if you're thinking about taking up sewing as a hobby, or you've been trying it for a while and it's just not like gelling with you because you think you need to be so meticulous about everything. You don't. Be messy, make mistakes, whatever it is Miss Frizzle said, and you're gonna end up with some cool pieces that nobody else has, which is awesome. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it gave you some inspiration and some encouragement with sewing or whatever hobby you're working on, whatever creative pursuit. You can let me know what you thought down below and give this video a like if you did enjoy it. You can also subscribe so that you don't miss any time I post. Yeah. I'll see you back here next time.